I was repairing a broken fence at the far end of my property when a private plane suddenly dropped out of the sky, barely clearing the pine trees before touching down in the middle of my field. The pilot stepped out, looked around with annoyance, and said, "Runway 07 used to be smoother. What is the HOA doing with all the money we pay them?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Sir," I said, "this is private property. The only thing that takes off from here is my tractor." Instead of apologizing, he pulled out a membership card identifying my land as the Cedar Ridge Community Airstrip. Then he showed me an insurance document containing a landowner authorization form, with my signature on it. There was just one problem. I had never signed any such document. As the pilot realized something was wrong, I began to understand that this wasn't an accidental landing. Someone had convinced hundreds of people that my field was a legal runway, and they had apparently been doing it for 4 years. What I didn't know yet was that the runway had been hidden behind a wooded ridge, and the people responsible had been carefully arranging flights around my personal schedule. That discovery would be far more disturbing than the forged signature. 4 years earlier, HOA President Cynthia Bell arrived at my door with a leather folder. She asked for permission to mow a narrow fire break along the southern edge of my property to reduce wildfire risk. The request sounded harmless. I signed a single maintenance form, but out of habit, I scanned it into my computer before handing it over. That simple decision would eventually save me. Within weeks, a perfectly straight strip of grass appeared, then orange markers, then tire tracks. Cynthia called it drainage work. Sometimes I heard engines beyond the ridge, but whenever I went to investigate, everything was quiet. Back in the present, I examined the pilot's landing logs. Every flight had been scheduled on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the exact days I volunteered at the County Veterans Center. Larger arrivals happened whenever I was out of town. They hadn't just hidden the runway. They had hidden it from me specifically. When I searched the company receiving the landing fees, Greenfield Recreation Services, I discovered it had been created only 11 days after Cynthia collected my signature. The business address wasn't an office. It was a rented mailbox. That was the moment I realized this operation had been planned from the beginning. Cynthia suddenly emailed me, claiming my property was part of a community emergency corridor and warning that blocking access could expose me to liability. But when I checked the county records, I found something impossible. The overlay existed. The legal authorization did not. My attorney, Daniel Price, contacted the airstrip's insurer. Their file contained a 7-page land use agreement bearing my signature. The signature was real. The document surrounding it was fake. They had copied my signature from the original mowing form and pasted it onto a completely different agreement. Then Daniel found something even worse. 2 years earlier, a plane had damaged my fence during landing. The HOA had filed a property damage claim as if they owned my land and collected the insurance money. I had repaired the fence myself. Cynthia had blamed a windstorm. The weather records showed clear skies. Until that moment, I thought they were simply collecting landing fees. Then Daniel uncovered the real objective. A luxury development called Skyview Estates was preparing to reapply for approval. If my field could be presented as an existing runway, the developer could skip years of zoning, aviation, and environmental review. And attached to the new development consent letter was my forged signature once again. The runway had never been the prize. My land was. The final proof came from Harold Jenkins, a retired accountant on the HOA board. Before Cynthia removed him from the finance committee, he downloaded the internal archives. One message instructed staff to schedule flights during my volunteer hours. Another said that 4 operating seasons would allow Skyview to market the strip as an established aviation facility. A third promised Cynthia and the treasurer early access to discounted development lots. They were manufacturing a fake operating history to increase the value of the subdivision. At a recorded settlement meeting, Cynthia offered me money and a permanent easement. When I asked what would happen if I refused, the the developer's representative leaned forward. Insurance complaints, county enforcement, and legal costs can make property like yours impossible to keep. Then Cynthia opened her folder. Inside were the forged consent letter, altered survey, flight schedule, and payment records. Exactly the evidence investigators had been waiting for. The treasurer looked at her in horror. "Why did you bring the internal schedule?" That was the signal. Fraud investigators entered the room with a warrant. Over the next 6 months, subpoenas uncovered the money trail linking the HOA, the developer, AeroMap planning, and a county official who had approved the fake emergency corridor. The HOA board was removed, Skyview Estates was denied, residents received refunds, and my property was restored. By spring, the runway markers were gone and a new fence crossed the field. I placed a sign near the service road. Private property. Access. My neighbor laughed and said, "Isn't that a little specific?" The old sign just said private property. Apparently, airplanes needed clearer instructions. They built a runway across my family's land. I simply turned on the landing lights along their paper trail and let the authorities follow it straight to them.